Hello, everyone. I am Iliana Hunsberger, and I'm a sophomore this year at CalU. For my research project, I wanted to talk about the heritable epigenetics and the environmental factors that come into play individuals dealing with substance abuse. Substance abuse is a big issue nowadays, as it is an addiction that leads to many social, physical, and emotional problems, and it can also alter the brain's functioning abilities. Epigenetics deals with our genes and our environment. It's not known to be considered heritable as it is based on individuals' decision making, as it's not a trait that is already in our DNA. It's based on decisions. Epigenetics deals when the environment factors like drugs can cause it to be heritable as it changes and alters the expression of genes through the DNA methylation, which is how it deals with fixing our DNA in areas that we're lacking, and the chromatin remodeling, which deals with our chromosomes fiction. Within the study, I wanted to look at the changes to the brain function as a result of substance abuse, which may have can cause epigenetics, and if so, like can these changes affect the subsequent generations, and how severe it could be. And as we can see in this image here, in this box, this human around everything is what represents the environment. There's good and bad. There's the sources, which is food and water, as well as there's social interactions, there's the brain, there's our body parts, everything's affected and our interests. But there's also the bad ones, which consider drugs, which makes a big difference because it all makes us who we are as individuals. Which can be a problem because if we have an imbalance in our bodies, the mind and the body not working together, it can show that it can lead to many psychological disorders and diseases. The method that I chose to go about this project was through three different type of areas, which was substance abuse risk factors in DNA and how they affect the brain. Because it's like what's consumed into us, and then before we make decisions, what goes through our bodies. And the second area I wanted to look at was whether these epigenetic changes with substance abuse can influence future generations, because ideally everything we do affects anyone, no matter if it's a lot or not. Everything we do affects people. And then I wanted to look lastly at the stages in life from birth to adolescence of when these traits could be fully expressed, because depending on how much child can change the way they alter their own DNA or future generation DNA. There was a study done on rats that showed that like the epigenetic changes caused by life events altered the behavior in rats dealing with drugs throughout each stage of their development in their behavior towards others, as you can see in this image. Um, so within the results that I found that for the risk factors with the brain process, it felt that individuals that dealt with high risk of addiction had reduced activity in the medial frontal cortex, which is this part of your brain, and had fewer dopamine receptors, which means they were not able to function and with their conscious as much as they would with their decision making in their brain, because everything comes straight. Your decision making, your thoughts all come to this frontal part. Everything around about in the circle goes to this part, which is that cortex. And as well as this drug abuse stimulates the dopaminergic signaling that connects from our spine to our brain that lets us choose within the rest of our body how to react. Um, Within the substance abuse impact on epigenetics, though, we found that the exposure to drugs or alcohol in an environment can alter gene expression and gene functioning. Substance abuse marks DNA and affects the expression of the traits passed to each offspring. During development of the cocaine addiction, levels of the brain proteins, though, increased in the nucleus, which means the proteins that we needed were not developed and sent to those areas. The cortex with cultured neurons of alcohol showed elevated DNA methylation, which is higher levels than normal. And as we can see in this table, there's a few gene traits, which was cocaine, opioids, and alcohol, and the types of drugs within that, and how they really did affect each type of gene and the portrayal of the gene expression. And then lastly, with the stages of development, are most effective through the greater levels of epigenetic substance abuse and present during adolescence and at birth. At birth, the epigenetic variation is lightly interconnected in genes in greater levels of substance abuses. We found that substance abuse negatively affects and influences early epigenetics that makes a mark on future generations. Many addictive drugs are now known to be considered part of epigenetics. And if this were to be further developed in the study, I'd want to look more into the sides with each disease and psychological disorders like anxiety and depression, which considered genes in those and epigenetics get passed on to and what trigger these traits to be passed on. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you.